Okay, so let's continue on with the discussion. The issue that I brought up, the next point that I brought up, is that these Israelite men out there on the streets of Harlem, when these women came up and started to retaliate and defend women, they were telling them to shut up, not to speak. They read a scripture calling them foolish women, and basically, telling them that a woman has no business speaking, okay? Well, there's an example in the Bible in the book of Genesis about Abraham and his wife Sarah. Sarah was an older woman, and she was having a son for Abraham, and God had promised certain privileges to that son. But Abraham also had a slave girl, a concubine, who was having a child for him, and this woman was taunting Sarah all the time, being that she had had the first child. And Sarah brought the matter to her husband. So I'll read the scripture to you and let you hear how God viewed the situation and the advice that he gave Abraham. It's in Genesis chapter 21, and I'll read 9 through 12. All right, so it starts off, it says, "And Sarah kept noticing the son of Hagar, the Egyptian, whom she had borne to Abraham, poking fun. So she began to say to Abraham, 'Drive out this slave girl and her son, for the son of this slave girl is not going to be an heir with my son, with Isaac.' But the thing proved to be very displeasing to Abraham as regards his son. Then God said to Abraham, 'Do not let anything that Sarah keeps saying to you be displeasing to you about the boy and about your slave girl. Listen to her voice, because it is by means of Isaac that what will be called your seed will be.'" So see what God told Abraham. He directed Abraham to listen to his wife's voice. So obviously God does not undermine women and undervalue their opinions and the things that they have to say, the way that these so-called quote-unquote fake Black Israelite men were doing to these women out in the street. That is not the way that God has shown himself to be. He doesn't treat women like that. He didn't treat Abraham's wife like that. She had something to say. She had a complaint, and he listened to it. So if God listens to women, what makes these men any different and any better and above God? So these, once again, the teachers of the word are fake. Next point. They were outside screaming all these hateful things about women, screaming at these women. I'd like to read another scripture, because everything I'm reading, everything I'm doing here, I'm doing on purpose, because these men claim to be people who are teaching the word and have spiritual guidance, and this is what gives them the right to act the way that they were acting out there on the street. So I'm going to show why that's not the case. Colossians chapter 3 verse 19, it says, "You husbands, keep on loving your wives and do not be bitterly angry with them." So now, of course, these women aren't their wives, but of course God didn't direct this to be written just about husbands and wives. It's in relations to a man and his relationship and interactions with a woman. And the bitter anger that these men were showing towards these women go against, once again, the Bible principles that are set out by God in the Bible. So these men are verbally and they're violently attacking these women who are offended, and they're using these vile curses. They're calling them sluts, and they're talking about murdering them. They're going to murder all of these black bitchs. He wants to see a smile on her face while he's chopping her up, and they're going to hang them. Well, what does the Bible say about murdering people? How does God feel about someone murdering another person? These Israelite men should know, but they obviously don't because of what they were saying. So let's see. So there is one simple scripture that explains it all about how God feels about murder. In Exodus chapter 20 and verse 13, when God is giving his commandments to the Israelites, these are commandments directly to the Israelites. These men should know this one. Verse 13, "You must not murder." How more plain can you get? So, another violation. Should we keep counting? All right, next point. Let's speak on the violence that these men were speaking out of their mouths, because the hanging and chopping up is not just talking about murder, but it's also expressing violence towards another person. What does the Bible say about violence? Let's see. I have a few scriptures that I can use. For instance, Psalms chapter 11 verse 5. I'll read that one. It says, "Jehovah himself examines the righteous one as well as the wicked one, and anyone loving violence his soul certainly So these Israelite men were speaking violently and speaking about performing violent acts towards these women, the women there, and black women. How does God feel about them? And anyone loving violence, his soul certainly hates. I guess God hates you, black Israelite men. Another scripture, Proverbs chapter 22 and 24 says, "Do not have companionship with anyone given to anger, and with a man having fits of rage you must not enter in." So, what does the Bible say about people who are given to anger? Those men who, once that woman approached them, just flew into these violent, disgusting insults and murderous charges towards them. Well, he says not to have companionship with them. So God doesn't look favorably upon them, and he says, "A man having fits of rage you must not enter in." And these men were screaming, yelling, cussing, and going off and everything. So that doesn't look good, black Israelite men. Another scripture, Malachi chapter 2, verse 16. It starts off on another subject, "For he has hated a divorcing." Then it says, "Jehovah, the God of Israel, has said, and the one who with violence has covered over his garment, Jehovah of armies has said, and you must guard yourselves, respecting your spirit, and you must not deal treacherously." So, how does God feel about someone who is covering his garments over with violence? They are being treacherous. And obviously, the scripture is giving a sense of disapproval. Okay, I'll do one more. Galatians chapter 5. In Galatians chapter 5, God speaks about different principles and how he views them, what he stands for. And he begins to talk about the works of the flesh, meaning opposite the works of the spirit, meaning sinful works, things that we naturally want to do because we're imperfect, we're fleshly, and we're sinful. So in verse 19, he says, "Now the works of the flesh are manifest." And he mentions fornication, uncleanness, loose conduct, idolatry, practice of spiritism, enmities, strife, jealousy, and look, fits of anger. And then he says in verse 21, in the lower part, the second part, "As to these things I am forewarning you, the same way as I did forewarn you, that those who practice such things will not inherit God's kingdom." So those black Israelite men out there, I guess they're not part of God's plan, because they were out there cursing. They were out there insulting people. They were vicious, violent, angry. They were threatening people's lives, talking about mass killings of a certain gender and color of people. According to all the scriptures we read, those are some bad people as far as God's concerned. Next point.